Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you here for our webinar on the rise of robots, AI automation, and digital efficiency. My name is Lisa Morton. I am the Global Marketing Director here at Incubeta, and I am your host for today. So we have an incredible lineup for you, but before we get into that, just a few housekeeping things. Today's session will run about an hour. Please do get involved in the chat over on the side. There will also be the ability to ask some questions. If you put your questions into that feature, we're hoping to answer them at the end. And this session is also being recorded. So this session will be made available to you via email after today's event. So today our lineup is Michael Ostendriver, Chief Growth Officer at Incubeta, Max Flasner, Global Director of Technology at Incubeta, Henry Shevelin, Senior Research Associate, AI and Ethics at Cambridge University, Quintine Van Kessel, Global Head of Product and Innovation at Incubeta, and then Charlotte Harvard, UK Partner at Sybids. Now, of course, this is an AI event, so we couldn't leave their photos like this, and we had to update them. I hope you like them. I think these are pretty epic. So to get started, I am going to pass over to Michael Ostendriver, who will be speaking first. We then have Max and Quintine up talking about what you need to know to be ready for AI. Charlotte will come in with the golden age of AI and how it can help you power your digital marketing. And Henry will come in and talk about how I learned to stop worrying about ChatGPT and love it. Hopefully we'll have a chance to answer your questions at the end. I'm going to hand over to, actually, it looks like Mike's having some technical difficulties. This is how you know an event is live. So I'm going to skip past Mike. Oh, is he all good? Oh, he's here. Okay, this is definitely how you know an event's live. Mike, over to you.
I'm all good. Thanks, Lisa. We are live indeed. Thanks, guys. Happy to be here today and tell you guys a little bit about this exciting world that's ahead of us. We've all been struck by a tidal wave of AI news and opportunities and cool stuff headed our way, leading to lots of fun concepts: fear, uncertainty, doubt, excitement, happiness, and pretty much everything that's in between. And I have a few tips and ideas on how to navigate this changing world the right way in what I want to share with you. Lisa, can you go to the next slide, please? I still see slide 5. If you are at 7, okay. If you're at 7, that's good as well. So slide 7 is an interesting one. I mean, Tim Berners-Lee, I'm not sure if you know Tim Berners-Lee. He's essentially the father of the internet. This guy created a lot on what we're using today to drive our businesses, drive the results of our clients. And I thought his remarks on AI were very, very succinct and very true. He said AI is not just heading for our industry; it will radically change the machinery which we use in marketing. And I think the word machinery is really relevant here and really interesting because ultimately that is what it does. This is an industry that goes through an industrial revolution based on AI. It doesn't mean we'll lose our jobs. It means we have to become a lot more efficient, and we can become a lot more efficient. As a bit of a fun thing, what I did is I asked DALL-E to make an illustration with each of the slides that I'll share with you over the next few minutes. And you'll see how AI can sometimes work really well. In this particular case, where I asked DALL-E to make me a picture of Tim Berners-Lee thinking about AI in the future of the internet. Pretty good picture, right? I was impressed with this, but yeah, you'll see we're a bit of a hit and miss on this one, because when it comes to AI and when it comes to using it, where do you start, right? And that's a key piece in order to get right. When I asked DALL-E for a very nice illustration on where to start, it didn't really know what to do. It on the prompt digital marketing manager confused by AI, it actually was not able to visualize that the right way. It actually shows wrong text. It shows somebody who could be a digital marketer, but doesn't necessarily have to be one. And it actually showed a topography that makes no sense at all. So while all of our LinkedIn walls are being flooded with the most crazy examples of AI generated images and really cool stuff, it doesn't always work like that, right? That's a key piece to understand. A few tips. I actually have 4 of them in order to navigate AI within marketing the right way. First one is don't be afraid. I don't think we have to be concerned that AI is going to come for our jobs anytime soon. It will enable us to become much more efficient in how we work when configured correctly. The element of configuration is vital and crucial in AI. That's really something we need to get right. And instructing the machine to do the right thing is a lot more difficult than we all think right now. I think that actually creates a fantastic opportunity for those analytical minds that we have with us in order to become fantastic AI trainers or programmers. But at the same time, AI itself will need to drastically refine itself into the right models. The prompt for this acute picture was robots taking the jobs of people. I don't think the image resonates really well with that, but it was a good prompt. The second one is the need for a modern marketing ecosystem, and this is a really important one as well. I mean, as an industry, I think we sometimes struggle to define what is AI, what is machine learning, what is automation, and what is data analysis. But ultimately, you need these working in harmony in order to be successful. It comes with a few key ingredients, right? It means a discussion around data ownership and the discussion around having your marketing data non-siloed. And it means being able to have a connected marketing discipline. This is not a nice to have anymore, right? It becomes a must if you want to navigate this ecosystem the right way. And it becomes a must if you want to be successful. DALL-E again struggled with the prompt of a connected digital marketing ecosystem. I don't know what digital marketing is. The element in connecting it was pretty okay, but still not as robust as what we would like. Tip number 3, enable an agile culture of learning. This is a really important one as well. No one really knows the rule book of AI in marketing yet. It's not been written, right? And there's a lot of startups around us. There's a lot of noise and a lot of opportunity, and all of these things come at the same time in order to leverage this correctly for your business. No one knows how it should be done yet, which means the element of experimentation and the element of quick learning, quick failing as well if you must, is really, really important, right? That's really the way to learn how this stuff is leveraged for your business. We shouldn't live in an AI-first world when it comes to marketing. We're far from that, but we should embrace it. And taking small steps in a very agile way of learning in terms of what works and what doesn't work is a really important step into this direction. The DALL-E prompt for this slide, a group of people eager to learn a new way of doing things, sort of worked out. I think the eagerness sort of fell flat, and the faces of the 2 men standing there are a bit interesting, but all right, we can take it as that. And the last part, and that's important, have fun. And that's a bit more philosophical, but it is really important to have fun with this stuff. These things can be amazing. They sometimes get it horribly wrong. They sometimes get it horribly right, but they are fantastic tools to use. I think most of us will have played around with ChatGPT, will have played around with DALL-E or any of the other engines that are out there. It's a lot of fun to play with these things. Don't have too high of an expectation that these things will immediately change the world. Have an expectation that they augment what you do. Have an expectation that you can learn doing things in a more efficient way through this. You're not going to lose your job. We're suddenly not going to be 10 times more efficient in the roles that we have. But there is a journey ahead of us, and we must be embracing of that. That brings me to the next 2 speakers, Max and Quintijn, both 2 heroes of Incubeta when it comes to the technology and what we do. And what they will do is they will unpack the topic a little bit into making this relevant for us, right? How do we leverage it? What are use cases we can think of? And how do you make it work for your business? Over to you, Max.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So yeah, I wanted to pick up on a few things that Mike was talking about here and talk you through what we think brands really need to be focusing on to be ready for AI. So firstly, Lise, if you move us on, it really is an exciting time for automation and AI. You know, the access and comprehensibility of ChatGPT has driven a huge surge in interest in all things ML AI. And it's also brought some great drama, you know, whether it's people hacking into ChatGPT and creating alter egos, or Bing's AI threatening users or encouraging them to leave their wives, or even errors with Bard affecting the Google stock price. So it's been a lot of ups and downs so far, and there's some really exciting implications in the marketing world. You know, even just looking at search as an example, you know, there's some huge issues coming around in terms of IP. If we are moving towards this conversational no-click SERP, what does that mean for all the publishers? You know, what value are they getting out of feeding the information to these AIs? And also, what does it mean in terms of cost? You know, I think a conversational AI-driven search runs about 7 times the cost of a normal search for Google. So how are they going to balance that? What does that mean for advertising? And even if people aren't clicking out to individual ads and websites, what does that mean for the infrastructure? So some really exciting conversations that are to be had over the coming years. Moving on, sorry, Lise. But yeah, everyone's talking about ChatGPT specifically, and the focus and experimentation in tech and data is always something that we would 100% encourage. And ChatGPT is undeniably useful for certain workflows, but it's not always necessarily going to be the answer for everything. Generative AI isn't always going to be the correct answer, and isn't necessarily the answer for all things when we're looking at marketing growth. And Q is going to talk us through a bit more in that in a minute. But sure, it's really exciting. It's really sexy. But for other brands, they're picking up on what Mike was talking about the connected ecosystem. There are a lot of areas that we require some improvement for brands at the minute, and that's just for general growth from a marketing perspective now, but also to encourage maximum AI adoption in the first place. So I'm going to walk you through those now and be the slight killjoy of a laundry list of things that need to be done before the other guys talk us through all the exciting stuff that can be done. But firstly, Lisa, if you go back one for me. The focus is for brands as we see them, these elements, which is the quality of data, the richness of that data, and the connectivity of that data is what's really going to allow us to drive growth in the immediate term and allow us to leverage AI to the maximum in the future. So looking firstly at data quality. If you move on, sorry, Lise. The AI that we use is only as good as the data that feeds it. It's garbage in, garbage out, or for the more optimistic of you, quality in, quality out. But what we see with brands all the time is an all too familiar story that there is some data team or data partner, and there is a data warehouse that is being leveraged within the business at some level. But marketing teams seem to have very little access or input to that in a lot of cases, meaning that even things as simple as their BI is still significantly manual or incomplete with limited functionality. They maybe don't have access to all the underlying data, and there's no ability to include other business data like campaign naming conventions and targets, meaning that marketers really aren't leveraging full value of all their data. So this is one of the primary areas we're helping businesses with currently. Not only surfacing cross-channel derived data for insights and allowing the marketing teams themselves to understand, let's say, which product categories are driving more order values and longer lifetime values, but also supplying that clean and consistent raw data for advanced data analysis and for ML and for AI. This is the fundamental step that teams really need to take to be in a strong position to get maximum value out of all these new innovative products that are coming out in the realms of ML and AI. The second element is the data richness. So we're often getting asked, how can I make AI or machine learning work better for me currently? And the frank answer is that advertisers seem to, they're leveraging it already. They're leveraging ML, they're leveraging AI a lot more than they currently think. Even something as simple as the automated bid strategies using Google or in Meta. They are forms of AI and ML, and they currently are managing the bulk of our marketing spends, and we trust in them a lot. But do they necessarily have the full picture? If they're only seeing the revenue that comes through in the tag, they're only seeing the cost that comes through in the platform, do they have the full picture, and are they really aligned with our marketing goals? So another area brands that can really drive growth in these areas is by feeding these platforms richer data around their models. So lifetime value, their stock information, their margin information, offsite conversions, competitor information. We really need to leverage those forms of AI and ML we're already using to drive more value for us. It's a very immediate win before we even get into the complexities of how we can leverage generative AI to drive value for business. The trade-off with these things, as we've seen, particularly if we take Google PMax as an example, is that there has been some issues with transparency and giving up degrees of control when trusting these AIs, which is a broader theme of AI that I'm sure potentially Henry will get into later. But the answer to this is, we can try and get even more data, through scraping search engines, through other means. We can actually unpack more and more what's going on with PMAX and actually push that information and leverage that within our product feeds to understand how these optimizations, how these extra metadata are really driving value for us, and trying to unpack and gain a little bit more transparency back from these systems. The third element I'd love to talk through is the data connectivity. So we then need the ability to push all this data back into platforms. So if we then have the ability to pull all our data down and it's all clean and of a quality standard, we can then run all these clever data models, these AI models, these ML models that we're running. We then need the ability to load it back into platforms. So now we can start achieving our goals by leveraging a lot of these external factors, because marketers, frankly, are quite simple folk. Typically, I find, myself very much included in that. If everything goes well with a campaign, it's always because of the quality of the campaign. If it doesn't, it's probably something else that went wrong. The price comparison of a competitor, weather, press, reviews, SEO's dropped because PPC's gone up. These are always the reasons for not hitting our goals. But we now have the ability to leverage all these external bits of information. If we can pull that data in, factor it into models, and then leverage that by pushing it back into platforms. So now we're in a position to take back control of our marketing and really drive growth and leverage these AI and ML developments that are happening all over the place. So now we've covered a lot of those elements of the data quality, and at least if you move us on a bit. We now have all of our data synced up in a uniform way. We have ownership of that data in our data warehouse, and we can control it and leverage it. Now we want to talk about how we can push that forward and leverage it with AI. So I'm going to hand over to Q right now, and he's going to talk you through some of the key takeaways for success with AI.
Thanks, Max. Hi, everybody. Great to have.
Sorry, I accidentally removed Q rather than myself. Q, can you come back?
Okay, we all set? Sorry.
Okay, so what I was about to tell you is that I would like to take you through some success factors of how to use AI. So let's move on to the first slide. And the first thing that I want to say is, you can definitely use AI to get content, to maybe generate images. You have seen in the examples of Mike that it works fine sometimes, not always. But I would like to say to you, if you do this, of course, do so, but stay creative yourself. Because you can imagine that if you ask whatever AI platform to generate something, that probably somebody else might have a similar question. And well, there's no way of knowing if somebody else gets a similar outcome as well. So maybe you're generating whole campaigns that look way too similar to each other. So stay creative yourself. And taking that one step further, if you can go to the next slide. We also know that, of course, AI doesn't have real emotional intelligence. So that's also why it's very interesting that people are getting threatened and chatbots are angry. They're not really angry because they don't know what angry really feels like, right? They're mimicking somebody else. But that also means that the creativity that you get from AI is very limited. If I look, for instance, at music, what stands out in music is often the emotion that gets into it. And that's why I think AI is not able to make the same level of music as people are currently able to do. So make sure that you stay the creative one and not the AI models. That's tip number one. Next one, please. Make sure that you know what you're asking the AI model to do, and that you know about the domain knowledge, and authenticate the output. Because as you see in this example, I had a fairly simple question towards, in this case, it was ChatGPT. And well, by asking it to find the lowest version on CTR, it got the answer right. Then I asked to get the highest version on CTR, and it simply got it wrong. It doesn't seem that difficult. So make sure that whatever you're asking, that you know enough to validate what you're getting. Next slide, please. And this also ties in with what, for instance, OpenAI say on their own services. They say that although maybe the answer that you're getting sounds really plausible and sounds correct, can be very incorrect and not make sense at all. So again, be very wary of the output that you're getting, and don't take anything just at face value. That's what I would like to say here. The third tip that I want to give you is make sure that you find a suitable model, because I've seen a lot of people asking ChatGPT many different questions, even questions that it's not suitable to answer, because ChatGPT is there to generate text. So let's see the examples. Can I ask Dolly to optimize my product catalog images? Of course, Dolly can make sure that you can create images. But is it really the right tool to ask to optimize something so specific? I don't think so. But what else? Can I ask ChatGPT to do automated A/B testing? Again, it's not what it's made for. And if you look at all these examples, sometimes it can help you to get input or to get a starting point, but make sure that you're making the use of the right model before you actually start implementing something or start using something in real life. So if you go to the next slide, you will see actually the output that I already showed a little bit. For instance, ChatGPT can be used to write copy for social media. Then again, I would not say that you should just let ChatGPT do that and don't validate that at all, of course, but be in control. And that actually ties in very nicely with the next point, with the last point. But first we have, ensure that you are in control. Because as you can see here, we asked an AI model to make a better background image for the, white background image that we have on this image here. And while some might be very cool to test, I think the top right or the bottom right can be ones that can test in an A/B test in ads. But the other ones, I see a bottle that's floating on hats in a New York street or Tokyo street, I don't know. I see a bottle in a spooky forest. That doesn't make sense. But that's because the model doesn't have the context of this bottle. It doesn't know what to do with it. So again, make sure that you, that if you ask a model to do something like this, that you validate it, that you check it, and that you make sure that what you're putting out there makes sense and is what you want it to actually be. So next slide, please. You see the result. The next slide. So as a takeaway, I would say, make sure that you are trying out and that you are experimenting with AI, because it's awesome, it's cool. I had a lot of fun doing that. But if you look at the points that I made, stay creative, authenticate your output, find a suitable model, and ensure you keep control. Means if you do all those things, you can experiment with AI, but do it safe. For me, that means using it as inspiration. So yes, ask questions towards AI and get it as inspiration and work yourself from there. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So I want to end up with 3 examples of how we are currently using AI or machine learning to add value. And those are actually examples that you can maybe do yourself as well. This is maybe the most complex one out of all 3 examples. We are using here a custom AI model that's doing facial recognition. And with that facial recognition, you can on the spot check your hair color, different hair colors or different lip colors. You see a QR code here. You can scan it and you can check it yourself live right now. And it works amazingly. So why is this working so well? Because it's specifically a custom AI model to do specifically what it's been designed for. And in that case, you can trust it because you have been spending time on it. And it's not like ChatGPT is very open, right? You can ask everything. And that's why you cannot make sure and you cannot trust it to answer correct on everything. But this you can trust because you have trained it for a specific use case. Next slide, please. But you can also think about more easy examples that are already around for quite a while, right? I don't know if you've heard about it. I think a lot of you might have the Google Vision API. You can use the Google Vision API to take all your product pictures. In this case, we did that for resorts of one of our clients, and ask them to put labels on them and also scores on them. And you can use that to enrich your analytical data. So if I'm serving ads and I also make sure that I got these labels on that data, then I can make sure that I can find the elements, the labels that are scoring high in, for instance, click-through rates, conversion rates. And then maybe it shows that, as an example, pictures with actual people in them will score higher than pictures without people in them, right? Something like that. But it's very crucial that, again, you use the data, but it's not in control. You enrich the data and you are in control of the analysis that you do from there. Next slide, please. We are missing one example. That's fine. Here it is. Sentiment analysis. I think that's also very interesting, and it's actually working quite well. As you can see here, I looked up 2 different reviews of the same product, one very positive, one very negative, and it's very capable of understanding of what is positive and what's negative about the different phrases within one review. So it's not just looking at the entire picture, but it looks at different elements of this review and says if it's positive and how positive it is. And by that, you can make sure that you can easily classify your reviews and maybe also add that classification towards your analytical data for, again, some data enrichment. So I think that's also a very interesting point to end with. There are so many already very tested tools available for you guys to easily start and get going with ML and AI within your marketing. Thank you. That's it. I will hand over to Lisa again.
Thanks, Quintijn. I don't know about everybody else, but I definitely tried the L'Oreal app. I can tell you I am not a blonde. With that, I'm here to pass over to Charlotte. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. So we've spoken a lot about kind of the ChatGPT explanations of AI. I'm going to speak to you more about some of the use cases that you're able to use customizable AI within your programmatic campaigns. So I'm from Scibids, which was founded in 2016, building AI to raise expectations around the performance of digital marketing. So at Scibids, we've developed a turnkey solution for the deployment of custom algorithms at scale across the leading DSPs, so likes of Xandr, DV360, The Trade Desk. What makes digital marketing the perfect environment for AI is a global industry and growing. I'm sure you'll agree there's plenty of operational challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis that actually we can have all these use cases to help solve. And a vast amount of data that we have as well. So the data that we have available in digital marketing is quite unique with the fact that the scale of it is, gigantic, but also the cadence that we're getting it is almost towards real-time inputs. So if we go to the next slide, we can kind of talk about what is AI. So one of the definitions on AI, if you ask who better than ChatGPT, is around AI relating to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think and learn like humans. Looking at how we can solve problems, make decisions, adapt to changing situations. If we go to the next slide as well, it's kind of like, that's one definition that we can use, but actually, is there some common misconceptions with that use case? So when we talk about training AI to think and learn like a human, one of the main differences is that the data input that we are able to kind of like compute as a human compared to what we're asking AI to compute is very different. So the scale of data, when we look at take a DSP, so an available impression, those kind of like variables you're looking at, the time of day per impression, the supply source, the creative ID, all of these kind of like accumulated together. The way we're going to get an AI to ingest that information, learn from it, is going to be very different from when we have, say, someone that's pulling the report and trying to make sense of that as well. So at Scibids, we prefer the definition that AI is the automation of non-trivial tasks that traditionally require human intelligence based on a learning system fed with data. So if we go to the next slide, there's two types of AI that I'm going to be speaking to you about today. So generative AI, which generates new contents, data based on patterns and information that it's learned from previous data. So kind of like the ones we've just been looking at there. So an AI generated image, it can go to text or even music. And then predictive AI, which actually takes the information that it's already got and predicts future outcomes using past data. When we're talking about this predictive AI, we're looking more at, how can we predict stock prices? How can we predict customer behavior? And in digital marketing, how can we use the data that we already have in your campaigns to predict the probability that a user will go on to maybe do a conversion, engage on site? The differences between these two are that with the predictive AI, we can actually measure and prove the type of outputs that we're having. So we can set measurement goals, we can test against control IOs as well. So on the next slide as well, we can kind of look at how these two can combine. So at Sybids, we've long believed in technologies that are able to mix the creative power of generative AI with the accurate power of the predictive AI. And this is very much the thesis of, where our kind of startup was born as well. So we mix the predictive AI, which is able to predict the probability of a conversion for each given impression, and also, the spend that campaign that we need to spend for the optimal performance, along with the generative AI, which is able to generate DSP complying bidder models with those learnings. So how can we take the information that we've learned and deploy it in a way that's kind of standardized and suits the methodology as well? So when we look at the kind of makeup of that, from kind of analyzing what we've been doing over the last 7 years, how brands have been working, we've kind of analyzed 3 main components that we believe are crucial for kind of attributing the ROI for your campaign. So on the next slide, we can see them there. There'll be measurement, brand safety, and bidding. So when we take measurement, you're all, I'm sure, very aware that measurement is a very kind of key foundation when building out a campaign. It's mainly deterministic in the sense that it's mostly rule-based logic, meaning that it's consistently producing the same output for your given input. Brand safety as well. I don't know many brands that wouldn't be happy without this applied. It's pretty much a hygiene factor now, and given, and in the logic that it's based with, again, very much rule-based. So you can have the possibility of AI kind of learning from and automatically detecting harmful content in your videos, for an example. But your brand safety is there to kind of protect your brand and be in line with it based on mainly rule-based logic. So negative keywords, kind of the reading URL caching and everything like that. And then we have the bidding aspect. So when we look at bidding and your ad decisioning, this is very much AI based. So if you're using any type of custom algorithm, this will be 100% AI based. Learning from the rules of your input. So Max was speaking about this earlier, how the AI mainly is only as good as your data and the quality of your data and the input that you're feeding in. So in order to create AI bidding rules, it's very much still sitting with, the kind of rules in place, the targeting that you've got on your campaign. So very much still sitting with, this whole, is AI going to take over the world and do all this? We've still got that aspect where, your campaign setup, the targeting you use, the planning that you have, the type of data that you're providing it with, very much then is the input for those bidding rules and systems. Taking, all those variables, thousands of dimensions, and applying the best output to kind of get the best performance for your campaign. When I started in the industry 6 years ago and I was a trader, we were very much still, finding line items and attributing manually bids per campaign, per line item. And that's kind of what this is driving for, because where does that make sense when every impression will have a different value to the campaign? So we need to make sure that the bidding is in fact relevant to that. So we know that those key dimensions, such as, it might be the URL with that time of day for that particular user, we're kind of in real time bidding and making the value of that to drive performance. So if we go to the next slide, how do we put this simply? So kind of spoke about this before, so I won't go into it in too much detail, but what's always going to be key is defining success. So the AI needs to be able to understand what's your kind of true output when it's your campaign, what's your what's your goal for your client? Is it CPA? Is it CTR? What are you defining success by? And how can we take that formula and have the AI understand it? Second part would be making sure that it's customizable. So a tech that is very much one size fits all isn't going to cut it with the type of campaigns we're running, with your clients' needs as well. So how can we make it where this tech is, very much relevant to your campaign? How do we make it suit your needs and not the other way around? So that could be, for example, making sure that viewability goals are respected, frequency caps are respected. And then finally, what does that output look like? So how can we make it truly customizable for your campaign? Whether that's using different sources of data, so if you're using any third parties to define viewability, attention, even your carbon emission data now, we can actually use that as an input for AI to in-flight reduce the carbon emissions on your campaign. How can we optimize towards greener inventory? It's very much like accurate use cases, which are going to become more and more prevalent in the next couple months and years. And then on the next slide, we've, these type of questions you might be asking yourself every day. We're answering them every day as well. So currently we deploy over 150,000 models into DSP seats on a weekly basis. So all of this kind of ad decisioning we're already doing, finding the best impression for you and your campaign. And on the next slide. So how are we doing this? We're already working with some of the biggest brands in the industry. So AI for digital advertising isn't necessarily a new concept, but the use cases can be. And so we're working at the minute with, lots of the media agencies, lots of the global ad tech leads as well, to really make sure that the data that you're using towards your campaign can be ingestible at scale. So how can we work with the likes of Moat, Nielsen, Double Verify, all these partners to really make sure that your output is relevant to your clients' needs as well. And on the next slide, this will just be kind of like an overview of Scibids, who we are. So we are a global company, but I think the key kind of stats there are the fact that we're still quite small, so 65 of us, but like I said, we're deploying over 150 custom algorithms in a week. So truly does show the kind of weight that AI can take and kind of drive results with. I've also got on the next slide a real use case example for you, which is actually with Incubeta client that we've been working with. So Charlotte Tilbury came to us with the use case of wanting to improve their online checkout. So on charlottetilbury.com, they wanted to increase the volume of sales that they had. We kind of took this and were able to deploy an A/B test where we had a control IO and the Scibids IO. And we were tasked with keeping all the targeting the same, so controlling for all those variables, with the only difference that one was manually being optimized and one had the Scibids AI that was refreshing data up to 3 times a day, deploying models. So what did we see? We saw that actually the AI was successfully able to help Charlotte Tilbury reduce their performance. So we minimized the CPA by 29% and increased the conversion rate 3 times that. What I think is really cool about this example as well, and we'll send it over after, is that this was one of the first applications of custom bidding in DV360. And Google themselves were so impressed that they actually reached out and said, can we kind of create this, take a template and put it on the Google marketing platform to kind of show best in use of custom algorithms for kind of conversion-based campaigns, which is really cool. And then I have one more example for you with Spotify, which I'm sure you all have heard of as a global brand. So kind of a different use case here. We were asked to use a different measurement partner. So taking adjust data for the third party and connecting that into the DSP. So feeding that into the DSP logic to try and get higher volume of registrations for Spotify. Again, we A/B tested this so that we have quite clear results on it. And we can see that there was a 30% increase in registrations, which meant their cost per registration reduced by 24%. So this was, obviously some great use cases. And I have more across other brands and everything like that. If you did kind of have more questions and that, so feel free to reach out. But thank you so much for your time.
Charlotte, that was incredibly interesting and some really interesting things that Scibids is working on. I now have the honor of passing over to Henry. I do believe Henry is going to share his own screen. So hopefully we won't have any issues.
Great. Can you guys hear and see me right now?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Henry.
Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, you'll notice my speaker image in the for the bio. I think it was taken from my Twitter image, showing me as a hairy barbarian. Well, I'm pretty hairy, but not a barbarian. That was made with Stable Diffusion, another of these image generation models I'm particularly fond of and have had a great fun playing around with. Okay, so a little bit about me. So I'm a philosopher, cognitive scientist, AI ethicist. I teach on the AI Ethics and Society program in Cambridge, the university here. I'm going to be taking over as education director for the Center for the Future of Intelligence soon. And I spend a lot of my time as a researcher and teacher trying to get a handle on the capabilities of systems like ChatGPT, Bing Chat, trying to maybe look into a crystal ball a bit and see what's coming, and making sure students understand the risks, dangers, and possibilities of these systems. So I'm going to try and give you a real crash course in this today. So to start things off, I think if you're trying to put a date on the modern AI revolution, obviously AI has had lots of sort of false dawns, AI summers, AI winters. I think you can start to see things really shifting around 2012. You started to see some very impressive technical work being done around this time. Something called the ImageNet benchmark, which was basically for tagging images, automated tagging of images. We're very used to that now, right? An AI system can tell you if you're looking at a picture of a cat or a forest. This was a real technical challenge where AI struggled to match human performance. Around 2012, there was a huge leap in performance thanks to the kind of systems that get called deep learning. Around the same time, we started to see big leaps in automated translation. This is a piece from around 2016, the Great AI Awakening in the New York Times, that looked at how Google Translate had suddenly got really good, having been pretty terrible before that. 2016 also saw a real landmark event, AlphaGo's 2016 victory over Lee Sedol. AlphaGo being a system developed by DeepMind to play the incredibly sophisticated and complex game of Go, sometimes misleadingly called Chinese chess. This was seen as a real impossible challenge for AI. I remember circa 2015, people were talking about how it would be another decade before any system would beat human performance. But in fact, AlphaGo actually beat the world champion. Things kicked up another notch in 2017 with this famous paper, Attention is All You Need, that introduced something called transformer architectures. Essentially, this allows, sometimes people explain it in terms of giving these systems the ability to employ attention, hence the name of the paper. But essentially, one way of thinking about it is it allows them to pay more attention to the context in which a token, like a word, occurs, and make more accurate, more sophisticated judgments about what comes next. Then in 2019, OpenAI unveiled GPT-2. That unveiled GPT-1, I think, in 2017, and it didn't get much coverage. But GPT-2 did shake up people's a lot. Did cause a bit of a stir. Now, GPT-2 is an example of what's called a large language model, as is ChatGPT, as is Bing Search. And in one sense, these are really simple systems, right? In one sense, all they're doing is next token prediction. They are predicting what comes next. Some of you may have had Nokia phones with predictive text back in the 90s. They seemed like such a sophisticated thing. It would somehow guess what word you were trying to type. Well, I mean, this is the same thing, but on an incalculably larger scale. They're guessing not just not what word, but what sentence, what context comes next. They're prediction engines in that sense. But because they are so big, so massive, GPT-2 used 40 gigabytes of training text, 1.5 billion parameters. You could think of parameters as sort of free variables in the model. They can do amazing acts of prediction. I remember I started playing around with GPT-2 in 2019, and it blew my mind. I thought, how can this just be a prediction system when it can actually, I can give it the first sentence of a story and it can write the rest of it for me, a short story. And so we did see some media attention around this time. There was a Vox piece about someone using GPT-2 to write their next novel, a piece from a tech journal. OpenAI's eerily realistic new text generator writes like a human. Here's a piece I wrote around this time, which I'm still super happy with. Go in, let's check it out. It's a bit of a literary piece, a lack of understanding storytelling for robots, talking about what GPT-2 can and can't do. And this created a little bit of a stir, but still the vast majority of people had not heard of any of these systems. The real question, though, for many people on the tech side was, okay, so we've made these things really impressive by just making them really big. can we repeat the trick just by throwing more compute, more training data at these things? Can we make them big enough and improve performance further? The answer in short was yes. So this is a log scale, of course, on the left. So you can see as these systems increase by orders of magnitude, these systems have been increasing in orders of magnitude over time, and they continue to work dramatically better. GPT-3 was released in 2020. Huge leap in terms of performance, could actually be used professionally in lots of interesting ways. And we also saw around this time some other clever papers. DeepMind produced a paper discussing a language model called Chinchilla that was a lot more efficient, could use far fewer parameters to achieve good results. So at the same time as we were making these things bigger, we were figuring out how to make them more efficiently. Around this time, in the wake of GPT-3, Microsoft partnered with OpenAI, a very good move, I think, in retrospect on Microsoft's part. Whereas Google began developing their own models, systems like Lambda and Palm, which you may have heard of. And it's also around this time that we started to see really impressive results with image models, which we've discussed a little bit. But I just want to give people a sense of how far progress has come. So back in 2017, this was state-of-the-art image generation using the prompt cat. This is state-of-the-art image generation using the prompt cat in 2022. We have gone from something that is totally non-functional to something that can produce photorealistic art in many contexts in the space of about 5 years. So obviously, and it's astonishing how short the timelines are, in 2022, GPT arrived and blew up the world. Massive search interest all across the world. Largest product launch in history. 1 million users within the first 5 days. Now 100 million users total. ChatGPT uses a modified GPT-3 architecture, sometimes called GPT 3.5. But critically, it's fine-tuned using a technique called reinforcement learning through human feedback. If any of you are wondering what this image is, this is an image that's been going around on AI Twitter. The idea roughly is that the inner bowels of ChatGPT or any language model are deeply weird and alien, this Shoggoth monster creature here. But thanks to reinforcement learning through human feedback, it ends up with a lovely, smiley human face. And reinforcement learning through human feedback, basically what it accomplishes is it teaches the system not to say outrageous things. It teaches the system to be polite, honest, helpful, and so forth. And also less prone to emotional outbursts. Okay, upcoming and recent developments, of course, last month in February, Microsoft added a large language model powered chat function to Bing. We still don't know exactly what architecture it uses. It's an OpenAI architecture, almost certainly based on GPT 3.5, but I think it's pretty much a trade secret exactly what they've done to it. Initially, Bing was hilariously erratic. I think imagine this is your first day on the job as an AI chatbot. Declare love for user, tell him to leave his wife and say it wants to steal nuclear codes. That's an F, Bing, on your first day, but it's astonishingly improved just in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's been fine-tuned, now performs better than ChatGPT for most functions. Particularly, I would recommend if anyone wants citations, ChatGPT frequently makes up citations. Bing is much more careful about citing real papers. Google unveiled their own equivalent Bard to mixed reception, not because it's bad, but I think because people were saying, wow, whatever OpenAI have got, Google have got to have something better, and it just looked like kind of a ChatGPT style clone. And GPT-4 is supposedly coming today. Certainly this week, but after an unfortunate leak by a German VP at Microsoft, or German senior executive at Microsoft, we know that it's coming sometime this week. Apparently, it's supposed to be multimodal, meaning it can do things like, rather than having one image model, one text model, it can do it all. You can tell it to produce images. You can even tell it to produce video, according to the rumors. Okay, but what can these things actually do? Well, we've heard some great examples in the talks today. They are already being widely used by professionals. They can write code, summarize articles, write SEO blog posts, adverts, and more. I think all the warnings we heard about their limitations earlier today are very astute and worth bearing in mind. The creativity should ultimately come from you. However, also just pay attention because this stuff is changing so fast. So a limitation of a system today may not be a limitation of a system tomorrow. We've also seen really some interesting specific fine-tuned versions of ChatGPT and other large language models in domains like HR, legal services, medical advice. And we're also seeing increasingly, this is one of my pet projects in the kind of ethics of AI, the use of these things for friendship or even romance. Some of you may have heard of Replica, an AI lover powered by a large language model, which has been in the news a few times. They can even be used to train on individual data and used to make data doubles. So if you go to the website typical.me, you can look me up. I've created a data double using a large language model there. It's very basic. I've just fine-tuned it on AI ethics. It doesn't know really any personal information about me, but I've trained it quite well on my work on AI ethics, so it can answer a lot of these type of questions. Now, that's a real basic free service. However, if you're willing to pay a few $1,000s to OpenAI and train it on, you can train the system potentially on thousands and thousands of text and emails, and you'll end up with something that looks and talks a lot like you. Okay, now there have been some notable criticisms of large language models. There was a piece by Ted Chiang that I thought was fairly sophisticated, made a few misconceptions a couple of weeks ago. And then last week, we had a very bad piece from Noam Chomsky. I mean, the guy's a legend, but yeah, I think he just got this wrong. A lot of people, bear in mind, in the AI research space saw pretty annoyed because they've been working for decades potentially on certain kinds of architectures, and now a lot of this stuff has been eclipsed by deep learning and these big models. So there's a lot of resentment there. So bear that in mind when analyzing these criticisms. In short, I would say that I would break criticism down of large language models and other foundation models into 3 categories. Some of it's fair, some of it's inaccurate, and some of it's irrelevant. Some of the fair criticisms, these systems do make things up. They're getting more accurate, but they do have a tendency occasionally to invent facts. As I say, Bing is a lot better than ChatGPT, but just bear that in mind. They can be unpredictable. Reinforcement learning through human feedback is designed to minimize that problem, but they're still a little bit chaotic. And they're limited to verbal knowledge. A key point here is that a huge amount of our knowledge as a civilization, as a species, is stuff that has never been written down. I'm not going to go off on a tangent here too much, but if you're interested in, for example, something like medieval warfare, right? You'll know that a huge amount of the reason we do things like reenactment of medieval battles is to figure out how people actually fought in these scenarios in the past, or how medieval cooking worked, because no one bothered to write that stuff down. And there's a huge amount of embedded knowledge in our society that has never been written down, that ChatGPT and other large language models just don't have access to. And of course, finally, these systems are vulnerable to misuse, where we're expecting some legislation fairly soon. Inaccurate criticism. I hear people say, oh, it can only make judgments based on what it already has been taught, what's in the training data. That's not true, right? You can get it to generalize to all sorts of new situations. These systems are easy to underestimate. I strongly recommend everyone just play around with ChatGPT, play around with a new Bing. And if you're anything like me, you'll be astonished at how good it is at tackling radically new scenarios. Even give it a question like something, how long would it take a human to eat a prime number? Or could a dog ever invent a light bulb? The crazy questions out of left field, and it'll handle them just fine. And finally, the irrelevant criticisms, right? A lot of people are saying, oh, these systems aren't really conscious. They don't have emotions. They don't really understand. Look, I'm a philosopher. I'm interested in these questions, but I don't see why anyone else should be. These are technical, interesting, philosophical questions that are irrelevant to the market impact and societal impact of these systems. Okay, so final few thoughts. What's coming next? Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this that I could discuss. I think ultimately these criticisms are kind of short-term criticisms. We're seeing an unprecedented amount of money, talent, and compute being thrown into making these systems better and better. Problems with this year's system may not be the problems with next year's system. The future seems to be multimodal, as I mentioned earlier. So this is a robot. This is a paper that was released last week called Palm-E, a version of a language model trained by Google that was hooked up to a robot and used to give commands and adjust to real-world environments. So we're already seeing these things being adapted away just from text to incoming sensory information and also real-world action through robotic limbs. So it's a fast-changing field. I think there are lots of uncertainties. I expect the next year is going to see a lot of clarification in the legal environment. Ethical issues, this is my meat and drink as a philosopher and ethicist. These questions remain in a big way, but I think for understandable reasons, we're seeing businesses and startups scrambling to seize opportunities in these systems. I should add, I don't entirely endorse this graph. I don't know if we're at this point and what the curve looks like, but I think this is a distinctive possibility that the graph will look like this. We'll see. We'll see how much how things accelerate. But this is an incredibly exciting time to be in this space. And I think anyone who's interested in seizing the potential of these technologies should at the very least be paying attention. Okay, and that wraps it up. Thank you very much. Anyone who wants to see any of my research on this, that's my website. And also anyone is welcome to apply to our part-time master's program in AI Ethics and Society at the University of Cambridge. Applications still open for the next year's cohort. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Henry. I'm actually going to ask all of the speakers to join us back on stage. We've had quite a few questions come in. We've probably got time for about 2 or 3.
Try not to remove anyone this time, Lisa.
Yes, please keep your clicking to a minimum. I think we're missing Mike, but we'll get started anyways. He might be having tech issues. But we'll start with, I'm going to send this question to you, Quinton. What would you say is the easiest win as far as implementing AI workflows or tools in typical marketing activity?
Ooh, yeah, that's an interesting one. Like I mentioned before, I think there are already quite some models that have been tested, that have been used, and I would start there, right? Of course, like Henry also mentioned, there are ways to train your own model, and that's, I think, amazing, and that's the future. But that's not easy. Just start off with a simple model. I started off myself with the Vision API because I was very interested in how it would be able to look at the images and then, well, use that data in processing, in analyzing, and then improving that. That would be my first thinking, my first thoughts of getting started.
Perfect. Does anybody have anything else to add?
I think to what Charlotte was discussing earlier, you know, there's generative AI, which is, you know, really useful for workflows, but there's a lot of predictive AI, ML engines that can drive immediate gains for your business. And I think that's a strong place to start, whether it's something like Sybids or, you know, talking about PPC and SEO, something like seamless search. You know, there's a lot of ML AI tools out there that can drive marketing growth for you right now, before, you know, some of the more fun, longer term projects that require generative AI.
Perfect. In terms of the next question, I'm not entirely sure this is one that any of you can answer because I'm not sure how much you can see into the mind of Google, but do you think search engines will start penalizing websites that have used AI to create SEO content with the goal to improve their search engine results?
I mean, one thing I can say is that I think the jury's still out on how easy it's going to be to detect large language model generated content. The current systems that people have come up with are really quite bad. I know people like Professor Scott Aronson are currently working with OpenAI to develop reliable detectors, but I see this as being a cat and mouse game that's an arms race that's going to persist. For my money, I think it's going to be very hard to find a long-term solution that can, with a high level of accuracy, detect whether content has been produced by a large language model or not.
I'm sure teachers are thrilled about that fact.
Well, it's interesting. So one of the things I think teachers can be doing, I agree, I've got several teacher friends who are livid about this. But for example, one of the things we're doing is getting students to use, at Cambridge, getting students to use ChatGPT for assignments explicitly. They have to produce 4 short papers generated by ChatGPT, and they have to choose the prompts, and they can tinker with the prompts as much as they want. So this is basically teaching students how to use these systems and develop prompt engineering skills.
Well, that is the future. Max, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean that's really cool. I think from Google's perspective, you know, if it improves the user experience, I don't see why they would necessarily need to police that. And I think overall, it is the relationship between search engines and publishers is going to be a really interesting one that comes out of all this development, because, you know, currently websites are being scraped by Google, and they're happy to do that because it means they get clicks from Google. However, the more search engines are trying to become this conversational AI where you don't need to click out and you just stay in the search engine the whole time, they don't receive those clicks anymore. And all of a sudden, that question of, do I want my IP to be, you know, viewed by these chat engines, you know, is a really interesting one to follow, and really intriguing to see how that plays out.
Great. Did anybody have anything they wanted to add? The next question really does fall into this, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you think AI models will be regulated in the future, and how? Essentially, there could be large issues with misinformation as we see today, deepfake images, videos, and even the use of our own voice to scam others.
Well, so one thing I'll quickly say is that I think definitely we're going to see a lot of legislation coming in. We've got the European AI Act coming into force later this year or next. And I expect there'll be a lot of panic and consequent legislation. For my part, I suspect a lot of this legislation will struggle to actually control the underlying phenomenon. So some people may have seen that Facebook AI Research released to researchers and universities a model called Llama. about a week ago, a very big text model with a similar capacities to ChatGPT. And within a couple of days, that had been leaked online, and you can now run that locally on an M2 MacBook. I think it's going to be very hard to keep these systems locked up in behind the walled gardens of a few big tech companies. Obviously, that doesn't mean that legislation isn't valuable or can't achieve certain goals, but I think the horse sort of has already bolted at this point, and it's going to be hard to control these things in a complete, thoroughgoing way.
Cool. Charlotte, oh, sorry, Quintin, did you have something you want to add?
I found something. I tried something today because I found how to say it, a quote on AI that says like, okay, in the future humans will be pets of robots. I found it funny, so I tried to create an image with different AI image generators using that text. And what you already see is they almost all say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not allowed to do that. Or they just generate images that don't show that at all. So you already see that even though it's not legislation, they are already limited.
We're definitely in a bit of a Wild West at the moment. Charlotte, from your perspective and from Sybids, what are you guys really excited about in the next 1 to 2 years in terms of AI?
I think probably all the new feeds that we'll be able to have. So like in terms of like programmatic as an industry, there's a lot more interest in how can we be more sustainable, how can we use attention data. So actually some of the main challenges that maybe we might be faced for like how can we make a campaign more sustainable then become a lot of opportunities, because as long as your AI is set up to kind of take those feeds, is privacy respecting, is fully transparent, then with a lot more data, you can do a lot more with it. So we kind of get to take things to another level and use new use cases. So I think, yeah, it's exciting times, and like all the different applications are going to be where, yeah, we're going to see a lot of growth as well.
Thank you so much. We are running over slightly, so I just wanted to take this moment to thank all of our speakers. Thank you so much. This has been a really interesting and interactive session. I also want to let all of our guests know that on the 25th of April, we are hosting a hybrid event live from Berlin called The Art of Chaos. It will cover similar topics to this as well, how to exceed in times of chaos and the opportunities that it brings. So I hope you do all join us then. You'll receive an email tomorrow that has the recording as well as a feedback form. Please do give us your feedback as well. It will have the link to register for this event. So thank you all again. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.